I thought I would go ahead and start my second part of Pinker's psychology. Steven Pinker is an evolutionary psychologist, as well as he works in cognitive psychology as well. In these certain topics and videos, we'll cover men and women, allies and enemies, humanity, music, fear and happiness, love and feelings, kinship and kith, parents and children, and of course, the inquisitive in pursuit of the inconceivable. And so eventually we'll be working through all of these. And all of these topics come from his national bestseller, How the Mind Works. He was first made famous as a psychologist by writing a book titled The Language Instinct, which I have not read, but I've heard it's quite interesting. And why not start with, we'll start with fear and happiness. Start with fear and happiness, if I can find it here. The smell of fear. Language lovers know that there is a word for every fear. Are you afraid of wine? Then you have onophobia. Tremulous about train travel, you suffer from siderophobia. Having misgivings about your mother-in-law is pentherophobia, and being petrified of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth is arachibutyrophobia. And then there's Franklin Delano Roosevelt's affliction, the fear of fear itself, or phobophobia. But just as not having a word for an emotion does not mean that it does not exist, having a word for an emotion doesn't mean that it does exist. Word watchers, verbivores, and others love to challenge. Their idea of a good time is to find the shortest word that contains all the vowels in alphabetical order, or to write a novel without the letter E. Yet another joy of many is to find names for hypothetical fears. That is where these improbable phobias come from. Real people do not tremble at the referent of every Greek or Latin root. Fears and phobias fall into a short and universal list. Snakes and spiders are always scary. They are the most common objects of fear and loathing in studies of college students' phobias, and have been so for a long time in our evolutionary history. D.O. Hebb found that chimps born in captivity scream in terror when they first see a snake, and the primatologist Mark Hausser found that his laboratory-bred cotton-top South American monkeys screamed out alarm calls when they saw a piece of plastic tubing on the floor. The reaction of foraging peoples is succinctly put by Irvin DeVore. Quote, hunter-gatherers will not suffer a snake to live, end quote. In cultures that revere snakes, people still treat them with great wariness. Even Indiana Jones was afraid of them in the movie by Steven Spielberg. The other common fears are the height, storms, large carnivores, darkness, blood, strangers, confinement, deep water, social scrutiny, and leaving home alone. The common thread is obvious. These are the situations that put our evolutionary ancestors in danger. Spiders and snakes are often venomous, especially in Africa, and most of the others are obvious hazards to a forager's health, or in the case of social scrutiny, status. Fear is the emotion that motivated our ancestors to cope with the dangers that we're likely to face. Fear is probably several emotions. Phobias of physical things, of social scrutiny, and of leaving home respond to different kinds of drugs, suggesting that they are computed by different brain circuits. The psychiatrist Isaac Marks has shown that people react in different ways to different frightening things, each reaction appropriate to the hazard. An animal triggers an urge to flee, but a precipice causes one to freeze. Social threats lead to shyness and gestures of appeasement. People really do faint at the sight of blood, because their blood pressure drops, presumably a response that would minimize the further loss of one's own blood. The best evidence that fears are adaptations, and not just bugs in the nervous system, is that animals that have evolved on islands without predators lose their fear and are sitting ducks for any invader, hence the expression, dead as a dodo. Fears in modern city dwellers protect us from dangers that no longer exist and fail to protect us from dangers in the world around us. Indeed, the only reason why the police exist is to establish some sort of law and enforce that law, and the ultimate purpose of any kind of police force or military is to reduce violence. We ought to be afraid of guns, driving fast, driving without a seatbelt, lighter fluid, and hair dryers near bathtubs, not of snakes and spiders. Public safety officials try to strike fear in the hearts of citizens, using everything from statistics to shocking photographs, usually to no avail. Parents scream and punish to deter their children from playing with matches or chasing a ball into the street, but when Chicago school children were asked what they were most afraid of, they cited lions, tigers, and snakes, unlikely hazards in the windy city of Chicago. Of course, fears do change with experience. For decades, psychologists thought that animals learned new fears the way Pavlov's dog learned to salivate to a bell. In a famous experiment, John B. Watson, the founder of behaviorism, as you would know, came up behind an 11-month-old boy playing with a tame white rat and suddenly clanged 2 steel bars together. After a few more clangs, the boy became afraid of the rat and other white furry things, including rabbits, dogs, and Santa Claus. The rat, too, can learn to associate danger with a previously neural stimulus. A rat shocked in a white room will flee it for a black room every time it is dumped there, long after the shocker has been unplugged. But in fact, creatures cannot be conditioned to fear just any old thing. Children are nervous about rats, and rats are nervous about bright rooms before any conditioning begins, and they easily associate them with danger. Change in the white rat to some arbitrary object like opera glasses, and the child never learns to fear it. Shock the rat in a black room instead of a white one, and that nocturnal creature learns to the association more slowly and then learns it more quickly. The psychologist Martin Schlegelman suggests that fears can be easily conditioned only when the animal is evolutionarily prepared to make the association. Few, if any, human phobias are about neural objects that were once paired with some trauma. People dread snakes without ever having seen one. After a frightening or painful event, people are more prudent around the cause, but they do not fear it. There are no phobias for electrical outlets, hammers, cars, or air raid shelters. The television notwithstanding, most survivors of a traumatic event do not get the screaming every time they face a reminder of it. Vietnam veterans resent the stereotype in which they hit the dirt whenever someone drops a glass. A better way to understand the learning of fears is to think through the evolutionary demands. The world is a dangerous place, but our ancestors could not have spent their lives cowering in caves. There was food to gather and mates to win. They had to calibrate their fears of typical dangers against the actual dangers in the local environment. After all, not all spiders are poisonous, and against their own ability to neutralize the danger, their know-how, defensive technology, and safety in numbers. Marx and the psychiatrist Randolph Ness argued that phobias are innate fears that have never been unlearned. Fears develop spontaneously in children. In the first year, babies fear strangers and separation, as well as they should, for infanticide and predation are serious threats to the tiniest hunter-gatherers. In a film called A Cry in the Dark, it shows how easily a predator can snatch an unattended baby. It is an excellent answer to every parent's question of why the infant left alone in a dark bedroom is screaming bloody murder. Between the ages of 3 and 5, children become fearful of all the standard phobic objects, spiders, the dark, deep water, and so on, and then master them one by one. Most adult phobias are childhood fears that never went away, and that is why it is city dwellers who fear snakes most. As with the learning of safe foods, the best guides to the local dangers are the people who have survived them. Children fear what they see their parents fear, and often unlearn their fears when they see other children coping. Adults are just as impressionable. In a wartime example, courage and panic are both contagious, and in some therapies, the phobic watches as an aide plays with a boa constrictor or lets a spider crawl up her arm. Even monkeys watch one another to calibrate their fear. Laboratory-raised monkeys are not afraid of snakes when they first see them, but if they watch a film of another monkey being frightened by a snake, they fear it as well. The monkey in the movie does not instill the fear so much as awaken it, for if the film shows the monkey recoiling from a flower or a bunny instead of a snake, the viewer develops no fear. The ability to conquer fear selectively is an important component of the instinct. People in grave danger, such as pilots in combat or Londoners during the Blitz, can be remarkably composed. No one knows why. Some people can keep their heads when all is about them are losing theirs. But the main calming agents are predictability, allies within shouting distance, and a sense of competence and control, which the writer Tom Wolfe called the right stuff. In his book by that name, about the test pilots who became Mercury astronauts, Wolfe defined the right stuff as, quote, the ability of a pilot to go up in a hurling piece of machinery and put on his hide on the line and then have the reflexes experience the coolness to pull it back in the last yawning moment, end quote. That sense of control comes from pushing the outside of the envelope, or testing in small steps how high, how fast, how far one can go without bringing on disaster. Pushing the envelope is a powerful motive. Recreation and the emotion called exhilaration come from enduring relatively safe events that look and feel like ancestral dangers. These include most competitive sports, such as diving, climbing, and so on, and the genres of books and movies called thrillers. Winston Churchill once said, quote, nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without result, end quote. And that is his section on fear, titled The Smell of Fear. In the next video, I'll briefly talk about happiness, which is a smaller section than his fear section, but it's still probably quite good.